we're coming to the end of these basic points I want to make about beliefs, truth, and justification. It's almost as simple as just defining the terms this way, okay? But I want to just point out that once we've defined the terms this way, that we can discriminate beliefs, we can distinguish beliefs into four basic types, and they're listed here on this slide: justified and true, justified and false, unjustified and true, and unjustified and false. And if you think about it, if every belief is either justified or unjustified and either true or false, then every belief is one of these four, is in one of these four categories. It must be in one or the other of one of these four categories. And when we think about what kind of beliefs these are, okay, we notice that they can be characterized in certain ways, or there are certain kind of very good examples of each of them. So with unjustified and false beliefs, let's start there at the bottom of this list. These are beliefs that don't get the world right and also are not based on good evidence. Okay, so you can think about kinds of illusions or make-believe. I myself, for instance, am convinced that a belief in astrology, that is, that the position of the stars when people are born, that makes some kind of difference to their personalities or their destiny in life. I'm convinced that that is both a false belief and an unjustified belief. Okay, in other words, there's no good evidence to suppose that the position of the stars makes a big difference to somebody's personality. And at the same time, I believe that it doesn't make a difference to people's personalities. Maybe reading the horoscopes themselves makes a difference to people's personalities, but that effect is likely to be relatively slight as well, both because not everyone reads horoscopes and also because horoscopes predict different kinds of things from one astrologer to the next. And people can use the same prediction to guide their behavior in different ways. So in general, I think that there's very little reason to believe that the positions of the stars, or what people call, your star sign, Capricorn or Libra or whatever, there's very little reason to believe that that makes any difference to people's personalities. So I believe that belief is unjustified and false. And that means that I think it's a relatively bad idea to guide one's behavior by astrology. It's not going to help people figure out the way the world is, and it's not going to help people figure out what they should do about it. And so for these reasons, I would classify it in category 4. And it's a kind of illusion or make-believe. You might think of other cases as actual, let's say, kind of cases of hallucinations, drug-induced or through, kind of mental illness. These are cases where beliefs are both founded on unreliable evidence and also are false. You can think about another example would be some conspiracy theories. I'm not saying that there isn't ever or hasn't ever been a conspiracy in the history of the world, but I am saying that a lot of conspiracy theories, for instance, there's a theory proposed by someone named David Icke, I think it is, or Icke, that proposes that some of the most influential people in the world are actually an alien reptilian race. They're not actually even human, and they're controlling things behind the scenes. There's just so little plausibility or likelihood that that's the case based on everything else that we know, that I would call this both a false belief. I mean, again, I don't know for certain that it's false, but I have it seems based on my reading of the evidence to very likely be false, and it certainly seems on my reading of the evidence to be unjustified. Okay, so if it's not true that powerful people are actually a kind of alien lizard race, then that, and if my reading of the evidence is correct that there's not good evidence to believe that, then this would be a case. David Icke's conspiracy theory would be a case of an unjustified and false belief. The next kind of belief, moving upwards from the bottom here, are unjustified and true beliefs. These are beliefs, like I mentioned before, where someone doesn't have good evidence to believe it, but they nonetheless are correct. They got things right. So for instance, if if you draw a card from a deck of cards and hold it behind your back, and I don't see it before you put it behind your back, and it's the deck of cards is perfectly well shuffled. You just put this card behind your back and you ask me to name what card it is. And I haven't seen it. And I say, Ace of Spades, right? And you pull the card out and it's the Ace of Spades. That would be a case where it was just a lucky guess. It's not like I know something or I'm psychic or I have some special ability to tell what the card is. It's just that I happen to have guessed the right card. And in fact, that lucky guess, if we do that exercise enough, then lucky guesses like that will happen because there are 52 cards in the deck and I have a 1 in 52 chance of guessing correctly. So it's not, I would guess the correct card much more quickly in that game than I would win the lottery, because the chance of winning the lottery is like whatever it is, 1 in 100,000 or 1 in a million. And in this case, it's just 1 in 52. So if we played the game 100 times, we expect I would guess right about twice. So people do make lucky guesses sometimes. They do get things right, just by accident some of the time. And this would be a case of an unjustified and true belief. It's true because it corresponds to reality, but it's unjustified because it's not based on any evidence that that motivates or gives a good reason to believe that the answer is Ace of Spades rather than any of the other 51 cards in the deck. Now, the next kind of belief is, moving up in the list again, is both justified and false. A good example of this kind of belief is scientific theories that are widely believed and held at a certain time based with good reason on the available evidence, but that later turn out to be false. So an example there would be, for instance, Newton's physics. So Newton had a view of space and time that held that space and time are absolute. In other words, that the distance between any two objects, sorry, let me put that slightly differently, that space is a kind of container that always has the same dimensions, and that objects move through that container, okay, and that the container itself doesn't change in size. When Einstein came along and proposed his theory of relativity, he convinced almost the entirety of the physical community. I mean, I don't know what it is, 99.99%. There probably are still some very kind of unusual physicists who think differently, but almost everyone became convinced eventually, after there was subsequent experiment and so on, to further support Einstein's theory, that actually space and time are more plastic, that they are not like an absolute container that always has the same dimensions, but they actually change their dimensions, that space in a way shrinks or expands depending on the movement and the mass of objects in that space. Okay, so that in a way mass changes the shape of space and of time. And so that's a very different model of the universe. The point there is that we now think that the Einstein model is truer, if not just simply true, whereas the Newton model is less true as a description of the way that the universe is. Okay, but the Newton model, which was believed from the 1700s when Newton proposed his theory until the early 1900s when Einstein proposed his theory. So for about 150 years, it was widely believed in the physics community, it was just sort of generally held to be true, that Newton was correct. During the time that Newton's theory was believed, it was a justified belief because the available evidence supported that view of the world. But it was a false belief because later it turned out that the universe doesn't work that way. And again, Einstein was the one who showed that it worked in the other way, in the more relativistic way. So again, what's the point? Well, you can commend the scientists in the 1850s who believed in Newton's theory. You can say they made good judgments in believing in Newton's theory. In fact, they believed exactly what they should have believed because all of the evidence pointed in that direction. But later, when it was shown to be false, we were able to say that what they believed, even in 1850, was actually false. So what they believed at the time was both justified and it was false. They got the world wrong, even though they had very good reasons to believe what they believed. Okay, so this is you might say, this is not as bad a kind of belief as items 3 and 4 here. It's a better kind of belief because it's more likely to be able to be corrected and become the best kind of belief, which is number 1, which we're about to get to. Because if your beliefs are justified, then it becomes possible to correct them when new evidence comes in. Okay, if your beliefs are unjustified, then your beliefs are kind of more confused overall, and it's less likely or possible that you would be able to correct the bad beliefs when new evidence comes in. Okay, so let's. I think that's all I'll say about justified and false belief. A good example, again, is scientific theories that are well supported evidentially at a given time, but are later shown to be false. And the last category of belief is beliefs that are both justified and true. So these are beliefs that are well supported on the basis of the evidence and actually get the world right. And it's generally thought that there's a close link between those things, because when we follow the evidence, when we think carefully about what we have the most reason to believe, we're more likely to get things right. We're less likely to make mistakes. We're more likely to find out the way things actually are. So this is thought to be the best kind of belief, because it's going to guide our action in a way that's effective, since it's true. And the relation between our beliefs is likely to be more stable and more reliable, since the true beliefs that we have, we don't just have them by accident, as in the case of the third category, the unjustified and true category, but rather we have them for good reason. We have true beliefs because our beliefs are based on good evidence and good kind of reasoning and support. So this is the slide that I'll leave you with. It's just a kind of summary of this distinction between 4 types of belief. And I'll leave you with this question, which you can kind of reflect on yourself. Which of these types of belief you would most like to have the most of? I think there's a pretty standard answer in philosophy that people want as much as possible of just one of these kinds of belief, one of these 4 kinds. And all of the others are thought to not be as good. But I want to encourage you to, at least ask the question for yourself and try to think about why you would want one kind of belief or another.